Hello, my name is Matthew Hallberg, and I'm the product manager at SerialTek. This is part 3 of the series of training videos for using the SAS SATA BusXpert, and this particular section covers viewing the trace. So in this section we'll just learn the basics of viewing the bus traffic and the different views. So in the BusXpert software there are several different views available to look at the traffic, each with their own advantage. The first view is a protocol view, and this is useful for viewing events across multiple ports and directions and looking at time, correlation, and handshaking. So essentially it's a side by side, by side, by side. You can use X and O to place markers and get timing between them. Handshakes could be things like set an X marker on the first hold and set an O marker on the first hold A, or set an X marker on PM rec partial and an O marker on PM ac to see the time between the two events. Please note that some of the events that you see in the trace are going to be bigger than others if you're in a mixed speed environment. So if you have a 6 gig analyzer on port 1 and a 6 gig drive on port 1 and a 3 gig drive on port 2, the events in port 1 will look much smaller than port 2 simply because of the span of timestamps that it took to complete that event. The next view is Spreadsheet view. Spreadsheet view gives a compressed view of what was captured across all ports with decodes of frames and other important events. It's useful for seeing many events at once. It's the most amount of data you're going to see on a screen. There's also a column called duration, which lets you know how long a particular set or a particular event took. So for instance, you could see the duration of a data frame and see how long that data frame took from SOF to EOF. As a quick pro tip, in the spreadsheet view, if you right click on the timestamps in the timestamp column, you can choose to change the timestamp values to delta, or change it from that actual, to zero it out at wherever you clicked it, so you can look at relative time. The next view is transaction view. Transaction view takes a command and finds every frame associated with that command. So essentially, let's say we see a read 10. The software is going to look, and this is a post-processed view, meaning after we've captured and started to display the trace, the software goes through and starts putting together all of the transactions. So we take that read 10 and we look for every single frame that's associated with that read 10. So the read 10, the data frames coming from the drive, and then the response frame coming from the drive saying it was good or bad. One of the other neat things in the transaction view is that there's a command duration, which tells you from essentially the command frame to whatever type of frame is used to signal to the host that the transaction has ended. And also a couple columns related to how many commands are started prior to and immediately after, which is really only for a queued environment. Transaction view is also the easiest way to track and see results of commands in a queued or wide port environment. It's much more suited for it, over say spreadsheet view, because in spreadsheet view you'll see things and you'll see tag values, and if you're trying to, let's say, track a command that took a while to complete, you'll look for the command with the tag value, scroll down and wait until you find something else that has that same tag value, and it could take a long time to track a command, whereas transaction view has it all together. Please note that commands in the transaction view are in order of command frame received, meaning every single command frame there is in that time order, but the contents of the command frame, meaning the frames that are associated with it, are in order relative to that particular command. And I'll explain that further when we get into the trace. Histogram view. Histogram view shows the greatest amount of user-defined events across the entire trace, meaning you set the events that you want there to be markers for, and you'll see a histogram, or essentially a graph of those events across the entire trace. I liken it to a 5,000-foot view of a neighborhood. Essentially, you'll see everything that's in that neighborhood that you want to see. It's useful in verifying that you've actually recorded events that are useful, and you can use it to see areas of interest like maybe power management, or if you have device hangers, you'll see some frames and then just a really long time of non-activity after that frame. The next view is statistics view, which provides a post-process report. Again, post-process meaning after the analyzer is finished recording and has displayed the traffic, the software is going to be doing the statistics view in the background. And so it won't immediately be available until it's finished going through the entire trace and compiling statistics. It'll give you a report with markers to events in the trace and also to performance-related items like arbitration, wait time, throughput, and others. As a pro tip, one of the newest features of the software is that you can click on the average values to bring up a graphical distribution across the trace. Also to note is that statistics can be exported to XML and CSV. Lastly, we have the data view, and data view is just simply what it sounds like. If you click on a data frame, you'll see the payload. You can search within the payload, or you can set a marker for data view on another payload and do a data compare. So let's go ahead and take a look at the trace and go over these views in more detail. Okay. Here I have a quick setup. I have an analyzer set to trigger on an identified device. I have my trigger position set to 51%, but I'm going to go ahead and move it back a bit to 15% because I want to see what happens after my identified device, not really before it. We have the buffer size set to 9 gig, but I'm not going to record 9 gigs of data. And then you'll see down here that there's these buttons for external power. So the BusMod and BusXpert have the micros have power ports in the back of the hardware, which provide 5 volt and 12 volt. You can use it to connect to a drive. What's nice is you can programmatically go in and click on and off, so you can do drive power cycles whenever you feel like it. So for this particular trace, I'm going to want to generate an identified device event, so I'm going to power cycle the drive. Okay, now I'm going to bring the drive back up. Status screen, you'll see that the device was triggered. So we saw the identified device. I had some counters set up to look for what kinds of frames are going across the line. So I'm going to go ahead and go in here, open the folder to view files. Maybe I'll do a copy and paste, just so we get some extra traffic. You'll see here as the analyzer is recording, we're recording a number of reads. You'll see some data blips here and there of how quickly the reads and writes are going. So why don't we go ahead and stop the trace. But as a side note, you'll notice that this section here is yellow. That means that we triggered, and this is what is being recorded after our trigger point. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the capture. Alright, you'll see in the trace that the trigger point is marked with this bullseye, as I mentioned earlier. You're going to see doubles of all the events in the trace simply because I have the analyzer set up to go through the jammer on both sides. So port 1 is looking at the traffic coming from the host and then going to the jammer, and then from the jammer back to the analyzer on the drive side. So if I want to get rid of the stuff on the other side, I can just filter it out as I'm recording or use these buttons over here. So let's first start with protocol view. As I mentioned before, protocol view is going to give you a side-by-side representation of what's being captured on the line. Okay. So here are large events. You see these COM wakes are much larger than the other events, and you can see here as I click on them, that'll tell you that the event speed is 1.5 gigabits per second. Speed negs being sent by the host, or the first D10.2, is at 1.5 gigabytes per second. Why don't we go ahead and just do a quick look at how long it took between the device sending the COM wake and the host sending the D10.2. So I can extend this if I would like and go to the last event on this burst. here, com wait complete, and set an X, and then go down to this guy here and set an O. And you'll see the time between X and O is 500 nanoseconds. Okay. So that's using an X and O. And you'll see you can do other things handshake wise. The next view is Spreadsheet view. Again, this is the greatest amount of data that you're going to see outside of using the histogram view. So here's some events that occurred on the line and what they look like. So here's like a registered device to host. This is the status fis. And notice as I click on these, there's this other thing over here called details, which is giving you the frame details. So this is a registered device to host. Let me just click that over to SATA, and you'll see what the contents of the frame was. The next view is transaction view. So we're just going to minimize all of these, and you'll see here's the identified device. Here's the PIO setup that came from the target. Here's the data from the target. Notice that I can see all the values that were set from the identified device over here. Some other commands that occurred on the line. Here's a read first party DMA queued. So again, here's the command that went out, the responses to that command, and then the command end across all these different commands. Okay. So that's the transaction view. Then you have the histogram view. So in the histogram view, I'm going to just raise this up a little bit. I'm going to go in and change the types of events I want to see in histogram view. So I want to look for set device bits, and I want to look for if there's any power management. So we'll just put some PM recs in there, and maybe I want to look for OOB. Maybe not OOB. We'll look for just scroll down. We'll look for com wakes. I can set the colors to be something a little bit more colorful. And then click OK. And so now you'll see here there were no SATA PM recs. There were several set device bits. There were some gaps in between the set device bits. There was one com wake. And if I click on the com wake, it'll take me to it in the trace. If I hold down Control, I can zoom in on certain areas of interest. Okay. Next is the statistics view. And this is already calculated, but one of the neat things that you would have been able to see is that the statistics runs in parallel. So as I'm going through the trace, the statistics are there, and they're being calculated in the background. So here statistically we have link utilization, SATA primitives, STP frames, what types of frames there were, ATA commands, ATA IO, NCQ queue depth. And as I mentioned before, if I click on this average section, you'll see there's a little I there. I'll get a distribution across the trace on what the average throughput was, when it was at its highest, and when it was at its lowest. Okay. Then there's also the data view. So if I look for a data frame, you'll see that the data frame is in here. And then if there's anything in the data frame that I want to search for, you see how it turns red? It means that it's not found. And you'll see 9D54 is found there. Okay. So that concludes the section on viewing the trace. The next section will be on actually perusing the trace, so going over searching, frame details, setting bookmarks, etc. Thank you for your time.